it's Lindsay. Welcome back to the Wandering Reader. Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap up. In September I managed to read 5 books and a total of 1,632 pages. It wasn't as great a reading month for me as previous ones have been, especially because I had the summer. But I'm putting that down to the fact that I went back to work at the beginning of September and things have been crazy busy, and I've been finding it really hard to kind of balance how tired I am with finding the energy to concentrate on reading. So also the energy, but also the focus, you know, because I've been using my brain so much during the day. I don't want to come home necessarily and use it at night. So I've really been trying to read a lot over the weekends, but like I said, not quite as much as I have been reading in previous months. But still, 5 books is really good. I would say, you know, on average, before I started BookTube, I would read sort of like 3 or 4 books a month, so it's better even than what I was doing before. So anyway, stop rambling and get into the books that I read in September. The first book I finished in September, and actually finished this on September the 1st, and I've been reading this for months. When I look back on my Goodreads, I started it in February and it took me all the way to September to read, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is the, is it Penguin? The cloth bound edition. I think it's Penguin, yeah, it's the Penguin Classics cloth bound edition. It's absolutely beautiful. There wasn't a particular reason why this took me so long. It definitely wasn't because I wasn't enjoying it. It's just because sort of other things were getting in the way and I didn't feel like I could dedicate the time to it that I needed to. But I finally sort of picked it back up over the summer, dedicated the time that I needed to it, and finally finished it on the 1st of September. So I'm pretty sure that most of you will be aware of what this book is about, but just in case you don't, this tells the story of Jane Eyre, and it sort of chronicles her life. And so at the beginning of the book, she's a child and she is living with her aunt and her aunt's children, and she was entrusted to her aunt and her uncle by her father, and her uncle died and her aunt doesn't treat her very well, so she hasn't had a particularly great childhood. She is sent to a school and she boards at this school, and then she starts working as a governess when she becomes an adult. And working as a governess, she starts working for Mr. Rochester, and things go from there. It's a very famous story. I'd never read it front to cover before. I think I started it a couple of times when I was a lot younger and just kind of didn't have the motivation to finish it. I just think it was not the right time for me to read this book. It's definitely the right time now. Really enjoyed it. It is quite long, so this edition is 521 pages. But I would say it's a really easy classic to read. So I didn't really find myself bogged down by lots of archaic language and long complex sentences. I thought it was really well written, loved the plot, loved the characters, and finally got to see exactly what happened in the story and all of those kind of things that you hear about to do with Jane Eyre and that resonate throughout the rest of literature. I finally worked all of those out now. So I did really enjoy this. This is the 5th classic that I've read this year, so I've got 1 more to go to complete my goal, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next book that I read in September was Codename Verity, and this was by Elizabeth Wine. This was a buddy read that I was doing with Lisa over at Books and Smiles. She didn't finish this with me. She was sort of the the terrible storms were going on in Florida where she lives, and she just couldn't concentrate on it, and it took me a while to kind of get into it. So yeah, she put it down, she is going to pick it up again, but we have talked about this quite a lot, and I really enjoyed doing that buddy read with her, and definitely want to do another one with her in the future. But this is a historical fiction YA novel, and it tells the story of these two women who become involved in the second, sorry, I just make sure I get that right, in the Second World War, by becoming pilots, and sort of it's about them becoming pilots and their involvement in the war, and one of them is captured by some Nazis in France, and so yeah, it's about what happens with that. It took me quite a while to get into. I would say the style was a lot different from what I was expecting. I don't really know what I was expecting, but because this had the label of YA, I was kind of expecting it to be a bit lighter, but the style of it took me a while to get into. It's quite heavy with sort of plain terminology and things like that, and that kind of took me a while to get my head around. But once I got into it, and I would say it took me a good half of the book to get into it, I did actually really enjoy the story. There were quite a few moments where I got quite emotional, one moment in particular that made me cry, and if you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I don't really cry an awful lot of books. It takes a lot for me to do that. I'll cry at the drop of a hat at something emotional, even on an advert on TV, but for a book to affect me in that way emotionally, it takes quite a lot. But there was one particular moment in this that I found myself crying, really attached to the characters, really felt for them and their situation, and there were some brutal moments in here. Yeah, I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good storyline in the end, but because it took me a while to get into, and because it had the style was a bit difficult for me to begin with, I couldn't really give it any higher than that. I think there is a sequel to this. There was like a chapter sampler at the end. Oh no, it's a companion novel called Rose Under Fire. I don't know whether I'm that interested in reading it. I don't know, we'll see whether I pick it up. Then the middle of September came, and the Man Booker shortlist was announced, and so that meant that I had to start reading the shortlist. So I'm going to talk about 3 books that I've read in the shortlist so far. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them because I have done individual reviews on each of them, so I'll link those for you so you can hear a few more of my thoughts. So the first one that I read was Autumn by Ali Smith. I gave this 4 stars. This is a story that centres around a girl and, well, call her a girl, sort of like a 20-something woman and a 100-year-old man, and it kind of takes snapshots from lots of different periods of history, sort of post Second World War, and then sort of what's happening in the modern time. It's a story very much, we'll call it a story, it's more sort of a character driven book, more sort of like a snapshot of modern Britain. Really enjoyed Ali Smith's writing, and will definitely be picking up more from her, and like I said, I gave this one 4 stars. The next one I read from the shortlist was Exit West. This is by Mohsin Hamid, so again I'll link my review for you. This one, in my review I said I gave it 4 stars. Since then I've taken it down to 3.5 stars, just kind of doing a bit of reflecting on what I thought of it and kind of how it compared to Autumn. I kind of decided to put the rating down a bit. So this is a story about a couple in an unnamed country somewhere in the Middle East, and war breaks out, or some sort of like terrorist kind of takeover happens. I haven't really explained that very well, but you know what I mean. And this couple decide that they want to immigrate from their country to a different country, and in order to do that, these doors have started appearing in different places throughout the country, and if you walk through one of these doors, you essentially walk into a new country. So these doors are heavily guarded and you have to pay your way to go through them, things like that. So very, you know, a typical portrayal of what borders are like. So this couple decide that they're going to leave their country and their families and their lives behind and walk through one of these doors together. And basically this book is about the immigrant experience and about sort of what it's like living in a country that's not your own and trying to settle in, and how relationships are affected by immigration. It's a really important book for now. You know, what we hear on the news about the immigrant experience and things like that, this is an important book from that sort of point of view. I really liked his writing again. I've said before that I've read a lot of his books, all of them bar one, called Moth Smoke, and I do really like his writing. This one, like I said, I did originally give 4 stars to, but I've dropped it down to 3.5. Did really enjoy it. I would still recommend reading it. It's quite short, so you don't have to invest much of your time in it. It took me 2 or 3 days to read it, something like that. Yeah, the 3.5 stars. And then the last book that I read in September was The History of Walls by Emily Fridland. So this is the 3rd shortlist I can't get my words out, Man Booker shortlist book that I have read. This is a debut novel, and it tells a story of a girl called, I can't even remember her name. Oh, Linda, there we go. It's terrible. A girl called Linda. She's a teenager in a very small town in Minnesota, and it kind of talks about this relationship that she has developed with the neighbours in a house across the lake, and it describes her and her family and how they are very much sort of like, well, she is definitely shunned by her fellow classmates just because of the way that her and her family live, and because she was originally born in a commune. But it's also about this family that she befriends and the things that go on in this household. I don't really know how to feel about this one. I thought the writing was good. I really appreciated the fact that it's a debut novel. I think it's a great debut, and I would definitely be interested in picking up more things by Emily Fridland. I thought the writing was good. There were some lovely descriptions in here, and Fridland had this really good way of capturing the sort of almost dirty nature of people's lives. Yeah, it's probably the best way of describing it. I think more could have been made of what was actually going on in this neighbour's house. I don't think we got enough of it. I think there were too many gaps and too many mysteries, and I kind of understand why she's done that, but at the same time I kind of was left wanting a little bit more. So yeah, I did really like it, and I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. So there you go, guys. They were all the books that I read in September. Like I said, not as great a reading month for me as in months gone past, but I still read a lot of great things, and I made a good dent in the Man Booker shortlist. So yeah, let me know in the comments below whether you have read any of these and what you thought of them. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.